G'day guys, what's going on? Welcome to this episode of Aussie English. Today I have another interview episode for you, and it's an interview episode with a fellow Melburnian, a fellow Australian called Adriana. Adriana grew up here in Melbourne in Australia. She'll talk a bit more about that, but she's moved to Europe since, and she's living in Croatia. She's also an English teacher, and she runs the websites EnglishTeacherAdriana.com and UsingEnglishTP.com. So today we chat about her experiences of growing up in Australia and then moving to Europe, moving to Croatia. We also chat about her learning the language Croatian as a second language and what that was like. And then we also get into English teaching with a specific emphasis on how to build confidence when speaking English. So how to speak confidently as someone who's learning English as a second language. Anyway, guys, without any further ado, let's get into today's episode and hear from Adriana. Let's go. Welcome to this podcast, Adriana. Thank you so much for joining me today on Aussie English. So we've known each other for a little while. I think I was stalking you on Instagram. That was probably how we first met. I think I probably messaged you and said, please help me do something with Aussie English.
Hi there, thank you for having me on here. But I must confess, I think I stalked you as well.
Really?
Because I found some really... You had cool images of 4 and 20 pies and Australian movies. And I was like, another Aussie out there.
Then it could be. But I think, yeah, that's it. Anyway, so we met online and obviously both Australians teaching English and obviously have that in common. Man, I wanted to get you on the podcast, I guess, to just tell me about where you're from, where you're living, tell me about what you're doing and just, yeah, have at it.
Well, first of all, my name's Adriana. I'm assuming that you and everybody else knows that. So I run the website EnglishTeacherAdriana.com. There I make resources for ESL learners, mainly intermediate to advanced learners, helping them with common topics which many ESL learners have problems with. There you can find lessons on grammar, phrasal verbs, vocabulary, tips. Confidence is also a big part of my focus, and fluency. I'm very active on Instagram, love Insta stories, and I am new to podcasts. I'm very interested to hear from you and from your viewers a little bit more about the Aussie podcast.
Oh, brilliant. So can you tell me a bit then about where you grew up and where you're living now?
Well, I'm from Melbourne, grew up in Melbourne, and I moved to Croatia about 7 years ago.
As you do.
Yes, but it's almost 8 years now. So 8 years, wow. Okay, and I'm shocked myself. Came here, liked the lifestyle, and I began teaching about 5 years into being here, got married, and at the moment I'm still in Croatia.
That's great. So what are the biggest differences between the two countries? Because, you know, it's pretty rare for me to meet anyone from Australia who has moved to Croatia and lives there now and has lived there for 8 years. That's a long time.
I think the main difference is language. I know that it's very simple, but language is a big issue that I do struggle with. But I'm working on and it's getting a lot better, and I'm very proud of my efforts. Also, weather. I don't know. Have you ever seen snow, Pete?
Yes, once. Wow, a couple of times, but it's not something I see regularly.
And where did you see snow?
I think it would have been Mount Buller, and it snowed once where I used to grow up when I was growing up in the Dandenong Ranges in the mountains there. It snowed once. I remember we came outside and we're just like, what?
Yeah, but I saw it also snowed recently in Lorne a few days ago.
What? I didn't hear that. That's crazy. I must be out of the loop.
Yeah, I saw that because me and my husband actually travelled to Australia a month ago now.
Yeah, yeah.
And we'd gone down, for those of you who don't know, down the Great Ocean Road, and Lorne is actually on the Great Ocean Road. And we were at the, what do they call She-Oak Falls, and apparently there it had snowed. I'm like, wow.
That's insane. That'd be amazing to see the snow down at Lorne. Is it like that in Croatia though? Is it cold and snows a lot?
Common question. It snows a lot in winter. It can get to minus 20, minus 21 degrees in January.
What?
And a lot of people ask me here, like, oh, wow, Australia, it's always hot. You're used to the sun. And I'm like, yeah, but we also have snow.
A little bit. Yeah, that's it. If you go looking for it, you'll find it.
Yeah.
So had you seen it before you went to Croatia, the snow here?
Yes, I'd been to Mount Hotham, and actually part of high school had gone skiing on Mount Hotham and Mount Macedon and in Dandenong. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. And so what do you miss most from Australia apart from Vegemite?
Tim Tams. Tim Tams.
Oh, did you stock up on them while you were here? Yeah. So did you take any back recently?
Well, I have an addiction, and it's chocolate. So I'm an addict. And my mother, being the kind person she is, she made a massive reserve of Kit Kats.
Wow.
So these sea salt and caramel Kit Kats and Tim Tams. So half our luggage was clothes, and the remainder was chocolate.
Did they inspect it while you were going through the airport, and they were like, what?
Well, it is like a drug for me. I'm not smuggling anything.
Yeah. I'm just opening a business. Jesus. Yeah.
No. Me and my husband, he likes the white coat Tim Tams, and I love the double coat Tim Tams. So and then my mother packed us this dark coat, and we're just like, it's not white and it's not double coat.
So were there any left?
No. Too demolished. It's all gone.
Far out. So how long did it take to get used to the cold weather in Croatia?
I don't think one can adapt to minus 20 degrees. Actually, the cold weather is okay. It's not about the cold weather, but then once it snows, say it never snows in Croatia if it's below, if it's in minus. So if it's -5, it won't snow. It will only snow if it's 0 or 1 degrees.
Yeah.
But then if it snows, and let's say there's 10 to 20 centimeters of snow, and then it rains, and then it gets to minus 20, and then it becomes icy.
Yeah.
So it's a struggle walking in the snow.
Far out. I would have no idea. I would be in such, I guess it's not culture shock, it'd be climate shock. If I came and had to experience that, I would just not know what to do.
The beautiful thing about humans is that we are adaptable creatures. So I'm sure.
And so how did you end up teaching English in Croatia as well? So did you start that in Australia?
Well, in Australia, I've completed my studies, university education at La Trobe University. Do you know about La Trobe?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And I did my Masters of International Business there. But then I also completed my CELTA from Cambridge, at RMIT University in Melbourne, on Swanston Street, I think it is.
Oh, wow, yeah, that's right near here.
Yeah, where it? And then I come from a teaching background. I've always liked, I played tennis as a kid, and I enjoyed working with children, working with people, interacting with people. Then when I moved to Croatia, I did work for a little bit in companies, but working in a company, and it can be challenging, and work culture is very different in Croatia in comparison to Australia. Work ethics are a little bit different as well, and commitment to work. Unfortunately, I was left without a job, and then I had my CELTA degree, and my sister came from Australia. She's like, "You've always been good at teaching. Why don't you use that CELTA degree?" So I began teaching one-on-one with children, with adults, with business professionals. I love working with children. They can be fun and it's so simple. and with adults, and then I began one-to-one, then I started teaching online, then I started creating YouTube videos, Instagram videos, and here I am today talking to you.
Well, you've got quite a following, so I was really impressed, and I couldn't believe the amount of effort that you were putting into your videos and everything on the YouTube channel and on Instagram blew me away, because I'm so sort of, I think I'm partially casual, but also kind of lazy. And that's probably why I'm just like, I'm just going to walk down the street and put the camera up and make a video. Like, but I love the different, there's just so many different ways to be able to teach English and I guess appeal to different people and different, communities and cultures and stuff. So it's brilliant.
I think everybody has their own style. Say, for example, at times I don't feel comfortable recording myself on the street. I like doing it on Insta stories, but living in Zagreb, and why I contacted you, I miss home. 8 years now, and I look at your stories and I'm like, look at them those Victorian houses, or there's the centre, or he's in North Melbourne, he's on Docklands, it's 4:25.
It's like, where's Wally?
It really is like where's Wally. So I think it depends. Everybody has their own style, and everybody can, I find myself in your style somehow. It hits close to home.
Oh, thank you. It's funny. It's just one of those things. I guess you just have to kind of own it, right? Just get out there and do what you enjoy doing, and you'll eventually get a crowd of people who like you for you, and just keep, clicking the like button and the share button and keeping you going.
For those of you watching, make sure to like our stuff, because
please share the video. Please share the video, guys. Share the love. So can you talk a bit about confidence and how you help students build confidence? Because that's something that my listeners, I definitely know, often ask questions about. What do I do to improve my speaking? How can I be a more confident speaker? How can I build confidence? If students come to you with those kinds of questions, what are some key points that you would tend to make or suggest that they try to do?
Well, I like to relate it to my own personal experience, because we are, you and me, we're both teachers, but we're also humans. So we also have to communicate and interact with people. Like, before we started this episode, I was nervous. And I'm like, Pete, what do I say? Pete, what do I do? And I'm a native English speaker. And I'm still nervous.
She was crapping herself, guys. She was crapping herself, but she's doing great.
And I think the people, I always tell my students, look, it's part of being human. If you're talking about a topic that you don't know about or that you're not aware about, I don't know everything. And maybe my vocabulary isn't fantastic in one area, but you have to develop a coping mechanism to be able to adapt to different situations. If maybe you don't even need to talk about that topic, but there are systems, and if you do think in advance, you can somehow avoid just being lost for words or left speechless. Also, sorry.
I was just going to say, I think you're definitely right, because it's one of those things, even... in my daily life, I think the moment that I got to the point where I was comfortable saying I don't know, or asking, what does that mean? Or that put me past the point of now caring about, worrying about, freaking out. And it's kind of like, just play the role of the ignorant person, and you can't lose, because people will keep talking. They'll explain the things. When was the last time anyone said, I can't be bothered telling you? No one ever says that.
You may get rejected, and maybe you may find somebody on the street that won't help you, or if you ask a question, but if you just stop, then you're not going to go anywhere. You just have to keep going.
And with those kinds of people, it says more about them and their personality and their day. They probably had a bad day. It says nothing. They don't know you, so don't ever take that kind of stuff personally, right? Like it's no reflection upon you or your English, or it's an external thing.
Yeah, and I think you have to look at the end goal. Say, you asked me before, maybe differences between living in Croatia and Australia. I moved here 8 years ago. I knew some Croatian because I do come from a Croatian background, but it was nowhere near fluent. Couldn't understand the news, couldn't read a book in Croatian.
Wow.
And also different topics. It was just, being a lot of my students have problems. Maybe they have a university education abroad and they can speak about, let's say, finance or about politics in their native language, like I could have done like I can do in English. I couldn't do that in Croatian. And then, try doing daily tasks in Croatian. I always tell my students, think of me living in a foreign country. When I first got here, I always had a pen and paper, and I asked questions, and I said, sorry, I don't understand. Could you please write it down for me? Or say, they also have this thing in the Croatian language, like they declinate names. So my name is Adriana. I'm going in Croatian, say I'd go with Adrianom, or I'm on this street. And so confusing if you're looking on Google Maps for these places and the words there. I'm like, can you just tell me? So I think that, don't be afraid to ask questions. Also write it down, and it will get better. You will feel a little bit silly at times. Maybe you'll feel ignorant, but in the long term, I'm still here after 8 years and I can speak fluently now.
It's exactly it, right? And it always reminds me, this seems to be a recurring pattern and explanation with jiu-jitsu, the martial art that I do. Every time I roll, we call it rolling when we fight. Every time I roll with my instructor, who's a black belt, he's been doing it for probably 15 years now. And I get to the point where I'm like, far out, I'm never going to be as good as you. I feel hopeless. I'm so useless. I screw up everything. And he'll say, mate, I've made the same error more times than you've ever even tried to do this. So just don't even worry. I didn't wake up here. I put the hard yards in and, made as many mistakes as possible. And that's the ironic thing. The more mistakes you make, the faster you'll actually get to the point of, advancement, higher advancement in whatever field it is. So it's definitely a good point to make.
Exactly. But sport, I love sport. It's something that I love.
It would have been the same with tennis, right? Like when you were playing tennis, the answer would be, well, go do 1,000 serves and you'll eventually get a good serve, happening. It'll eventually be a lot better than it currently is, but complaining about it won't improve it.
Oh, look, so I grew up playing tennis from a young age and I love sport. You're not happy when your coach tells you have to be serving 1,000 serves every week to get that perfect serve with that spin so that it kicks. But you just have to do that, and you have to remain dedicated and committed and get angry.
Yeah, exactly.
Get angry, it's not working. Maybe bash your racket and curse everybody. But I think when you're practicing jiu-jitsu, are you always positive? Like, I get the impression that you're a positive person.
You just have to. It breeds that kind of positivity. And I think it's the same with anything, that when people get to that high level, the same with English. Anyone listening to this who can understand what we're saying has obviously pushed through those initial stages and is the kind of person who's willing to fight hard and be positive and keep going. So I think it's just that endeavors like this tend to attract people who are pretty positive and hardworking. And that's another point, that it's easy to always be like, only talented people get there, but it's a lot harder to realize, I guess, that it's actually hard work that will kick the crap out of talent 10 times out of 10. So that's the good thing. Everyone's always like, I'm not talented enough to learn English to fluency. I'm not talented enough to become, Roger Federer. And it's like, look, you don't have to be talented. Just work harder than all those guys who are talented, because hard work will trump talent every time. And that's what you've got endless amounts of. Just keep throwing hard work at it. Keep, listening to 100 hours of English every month and just push.
It's true. I had to... interesting when I look back at them. There was these two, let's say, teacher. One was a teacher and one was a coach. He was my 9th and 10th grade teacher, and year 9, year 10 teacher, homeroom teacher. And I remember he would always tell us. So maybe, have you explained to your viewers what is year 9 and year 10? Or?
No, we could discuss that if you want. Definitely.
But maybe I'll tell you, I remember this teacher, he said, organisation is the key to success and happiness.
Yeah.
Never understood what the bloke was on about. Now I understand. And my tennis coach also, perfect practice makes perfect. 3 P's of life.
Yeah.
And these two quotes, or they're really stuck in my mind. And whenever I'm in doubt, be that in Croatian, be that anything that I do, if it's running, I started running recently, be that, I don't know, going for a walk or cooking something, making the best meal, I just think, okay, I have to be organized and I have to practice, but not just any sort of practice, perfect practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And so I guess one thing I wanted to ask you is, there are probably quite a few listeners here who feel that they're not at the fluent level yet and have potentially moved to Australia and are trying to learn Australian English. When you did effectively the inverse of that and went from Australia to Croatia, how did you go about learning Croatian? Because I also imagine that there is much, much, much fewer resources or much less resources, if I want to use the correct grammar, for Croatian than there is for English. So what is it like when you suddenly move to this country that you want to learn the language for, you don't speak it fluently yet? What are some things that you would suggest doing that would sort of fast track or speed up that process of learning the language to fluency?
Ooh, this is an easy answer, but I'll tell you my example, what I did. So I migrated here 8 years ago. It is 8 years ago. And I got here to a foreign country. I knew some people. Great, I live in this country now. But like I said before, I could understand and speak some Croatian, but I turn on the TV, I'm like, what are they saying? You have to understand what I tell my students or anyone watching at the moment, with any language, say people tend to ask me, British English, American English. First of all, what about Australian English? It's fantastic.
That's when the New Zealanders are going to be like, what about us?
Sorry, Kiwis out there, Canadians.
South Africans.
South Africans. But my point is the same with the Croatian language. So you have various dialects. I live, not to get so technical, but if you're from the east of Croatia, you'll be using different words. If you're living in the south of Croatia, you'll be using different words, grammar. Oh. And if you're about 100 k's from kilometers away from Zagreb, I can't understand you. Really? Let me put it like that.
Far out.
Yeah, because they have a combination of Slovenian and Hungarian with Croatian. So what I did was I understood that, okay, because my parents are originally from Bosnia, Croats from Bosnia, and then with that I had more, my dialect was more for this region. So I got here and I enrolled in a language school. That's the first step that I took. I was writing my master's thesis and I was at home. I wasn't talking to anybody. This was a problem. But then I also had another problem at the language school. At the language school, it was at the Faculty of Philosophy. Faculty of Philosophy. I'm just trying to translate.
Yep.
And then at this faculty, there were heaps of foreigners. So there were Norwegians, there were Americans, there were Canadians, people from China, from Taiwan. It was a great environment to be in. But because I already had knowledge of Croatian, my Croatian's comprehension and understanding were at a high level, but my grammar wasn't at a high level.
That's always the case with all of us.
But then I had the problem that when we'd be going out for drinks or going to museums or just communicating, all the communication would be in English. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, this isn't helping me. Yeah. So we're communicating, we're doing this, I'm going to language school, but I'm using English in my spare time and making friends in English. Being the stubborn person I am, and also knowing that, okay, perfect practice makes perfect. Like, I'm going to go start a Zumba class, I'm going to do Croatian folk dancing, I'm going to join a book club, and I started doing all of these things. Don't ask me why. I just knew that I need to make local friends and communicate in the local dialects, also understand the culture, because what we were learning at school, again, wasn't what I understood, what I saw in my everyday life. Yeah. So I'd have issues with my teacher saying, but I don't see that on the streets. But you're teaching me standard Croatian, but it's not used there. I also make this aware to my students that, if you're going to move to Melbourne, we use some words, some phrases that could be different to those in Brisbane and in Perth. Yeah. And maybe my accent I don't have such a strong accent compared to somebody living up in Darwin or Central Australia. because of our surroundings, and surroundings is key.
Yep. And it's so crazy. Yesterday, I had an interview with Lorena from Go Study Australia, and she was saying exactly the same thing, where she'll meet students who are having difficulties, and sometimes it's that they've studied like crazy at a school, but they haven't had a job, or they haven't socialized outside, or they have mingled too much with their own crowd that speak their native language. And it's kind of like you need to hit all these bases of study is one thing, socializing is another thing, and then potentially working is another thing. And it's almost like it is the same language used in each of those regions, but they tend to be used in different ways, and you kind of need to learn all of them to get a real, solid understanding of English. So I think you definitely hit the nail on the head there. So with online learning and getting into that, what sort of tips would you have for students who may potentially be living in Australia and hitting all these three bases, but want to supplement a little bit, do a bit extra by using online resources, or who may be learning, elsewhere in the world, like over in Europe or in Asia somewhere, and want to use online resources? First of all, what can you tell us about your resources and how they're awesome? And what would you suggest students look for when they're online looking for really good resources, and how should they use them?
I think it really, first of all, it depends on the student. So for those listening at the moment, clearly define why you're learning English. I know this may sound very simple, but it's very important. For me, in my Croatian learning journey, it was to be able to communicate, to be able to do business here, to be able to go for coffee and to have a decent conversation on, Donald Trump, if we want to talk about Donald Trump, or on making coffee, or the best nail polish to buy. Doesn't matter what it is, understand why you're learning English. And then look for a program that will help you. And why do I say program, or something that is consistent? Because this will help you so that you can, if you understand why, and if you find some program that matches your why and remains consistent. Consistency is key, because if you do small things every day, it will improve. You may not see it at that very moment, but in time you will get better. But also find something you like. Think about what you enjoy doing in your native language. Is it maybe painting your nails, or something simple like that? Is it reading? Is it looking up the latest gadget? Is it looking for recipes on YouTube? Anything you like to do. Think about this and try to find somebody or some form of community that you can communicate with people about your interests, your passions, because this is what you're going to be talking about in English, and you need to supplement, structured learning with your hobbies. And then that structured learning, you'll notice the difficulties you're having in those hobbies, communicating, and then you'll understand the logic to those courses or programs. You'll be like, I need that grammar tense to really tell that person that. So always understand why, work through it, and why is the most important thing.
That's such a good point to make, and it's beyond just language learning. I think that's the same. I have to keep asking myself that. Why am I doing Aussie English? Or why am I going to the gym? Why am I, wanting to learn French? And I have to keep trying to sort of have that ultimate destination that you can see, but then have those short-term goals, or those short-term sort of milestones that you can reach on the way to that why. So yeah, man, I think that was a brilliant sort of point to make and potentially finish up on. So where can all the people listening at the moment find more about you and, learn more about your course, sign up for the Instagram, make your plugs?
First of all, thank you, Pete. Thank you very much for having me here.
It's my absolute pleasure.
If you would like to continue learning with me or find out more about my training programs, I do suggest my website, www.englishteacheradriana.com. There you will find all the resources you need to get started today, and more details about my training programs, which you are more welcome to join.
Brilliant. Awesome. Well, I guess we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Adriana, for joining us. See you later, guys.
Thank you, Pete.
See you guys.
Bye.
So I hope you enjoyed that episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Adriana from EnglishWithAdriana.com and UsingEnglishTP.com. If you guys want lessons with Adriana, she teaches, so you can always get in contact with her and ask her if she's got any space to give private lessons. So she's another one of those teachers who's obviously Australian and can help you learn Australian English if that's what you're after. All of the links will be below, guys, so if you want to go visit her websites, if you want to see her on Facebook, on Instagram, or on YouTube, the links will be below. A few housekeeping things before we finish up, guys. Remember, if you want to support the Aussie English podcast and you want to keep helping me do what I do, creating English content to help you improve your Aussie English, then feel free to sign up to be a patron via the Aussie English Patreon page, where you can donate anything from $1 a month to support Aussie English. If you want to support Aussie English as well, whilst also improving your English, you can enroll in the Aussie English Classroom. This is an online classroom where you get 4 lessons every month, so you get weekly lessons, and these go with the expression episodes on the podcast. And they're specially designed to really reinforce everything that you hear and learn in every expression episode. So we go through exercises for speaking, listening, writing, and reading. You get a lesson PDF transcript that's between 30 and 40 pages long. You get an MP3 with that, obviously. We then have vocab tables and glossaries. We have the listening comprehension exercises for the lesson. There's a phrasal verb exercise, an MP3 for you to practice wherever you want on your phone. So I always love emphasizing the use of phrasal verbs, and we always go over these in every single class. There's Aussie slang exercises. I also love going a bit deeper into the pronunciation and connected speech exercises that I bring up in each episode. And there's a grammar exercise for all of you grammar nerds as well. So remember, you can sign up if you go to the Aussie English Classroom on the website. There'll be a link connected below. It's $1 for your first month, guys. Just $1. You can cancel at any time, although I know that you're going to want to continue because it is a great resource for learning Australian English. Anyway, guys, I've chatted too much. I've rabbited on a heap. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I'll chat to you soon. All the best.